Okay, we're live.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, thanks for making time for us tonight. This is the Housing Commission meeting. This is Thursday, May 6th, 2021. Annette, would you be so kind as to call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. Whoop. Making sure I was on and hit all of my buttons here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Irene.
Hi.
And if I may just do a quick reminder when you say that you are here and give your name and the city and county in which you reside, if you would please, for our new virtual setting.
All right. Did you want me to go, Annette?
Yes, if you would.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, Irene McDonald Cahill, East Lansing, Michigan. I live on Virginia Avenue. Thank you.
Janelle.
Good evening, everyone. Janelle Cannon, attending virtually from East Lansing, County of Ingham.
Thank you. Jennifer.
Jennifer Ferguson. I'm here virtually. I live in Ingham County on Artson Road.
And Larry.
Hi, Larry Rosen, City of East Lansing, Ingham County.
Thank you. Alan.
Alan Wood, present from East Lansing, County of Ingham.
Thank you. Carrie.
Hi, Carrie Freeman, attending virtually. I live in East Lansing in Clinton County.
Thank you. And Casey.
This is Casey Kefchin, attending virtually from East Lansing in Ingham County.
And I believe roll is complete and everybody is present. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. So we'll do the agenda and the minutes and then start thinking about who wants to do the motion for public comment. So start thinking about that motion, my fellow commissioners, please. So we'll move on to 1.2, the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Irene, a motion. Irene, second.
So I think I heard a motion to approve the agenda by Larry and a second by Irene.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Great, the agenda is approved. Thank you. Next, we've got approval of the minutes from last meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Irene, a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Ariel, second.
All right, so I hear a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting from Irene and a second from Carrie. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. All right, minutes are approved. Do I hear a motion about virtual public participation?
Okay, Irene will make a motion about virtual public participation tonight.
All right, so our standard language we generally use, so I'll restate your motion if you may let me be so bold, Irene. In order to maintain order of the online public meeting, we've got a motion to adopt the rule pursuant to MCL 15.263 subsection 1, limiting public comment at this meeting to 2 minutes per individual. Do I hear a second?
I second.
I have a second from Jennifer. All those in, let's do, yeah, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. All right, that motion is adopted. So, and then we'll go through, when we get to the communications from the public part, which is coming up soon, we'll go through, you know, the directions for the folks who are, or if they're planning to participate. We'll go through the technical steps of how we do that. Any commissioner concerns or announcements from anybody? All right, hearing none. I waited all that time because sometimes it takes a while to find that unmute button. We'll move on to communications from the public. Annette, do we have anything that came across your desk that we don't already have yet?
No, this evening I have not received any further communications from the public to share with the commission. Thank you.
And do we have any folks wishing to speak to us tonight in public comment format about things in general?
At this point, I do not see anybody waiting in the queue to speak to us.
Okay, all right. In that case, we can move on to item number 4. We have a special presentation from Sharon Woods from LandUse USA, who's going to present the housing study to us. You all had an opportunity to flip through that draft report. So yeah, take it away, Annette and Sharon.
Yes, thanks. We do have Sharon Woods with us this evening. I know that some of you had an opportunity to meet Sharon. It's been a few months ago now. I should have written down which month. Sorry, I might have put it actually in my memo. But I think many of you were able to hear Sharon's presentation where she did give a bit of her methodology at that point in time and some of the data that she was going to be researching for the housing study. We've now reached the point where we still call it a draft housing study because I think we'll be picking up more as time goes, but it's at the point now where we really want to share it with everyone. Sharon did give a presentation to City Council, 2 presentations actually last month, because we're in May already. I had to think about that a minute. So Sharon did give a presentation to City Council. The first meeting giving a lot of her background, which is very interesting. And if you have an opportunity, I would encourage you to go back to that portion of City Council meeting maybe and take a look at it. And then in the following meeting, got a little bit more into the meat of the study and really pointing out some highlights or things for folks to take a look at to help in the understanding of the study and help give some direction. And then she answered questions of the council. And again, if you get a chance, I also encourage you all to take a look and listen or view that meeting. Also, it may prove to be helpful because the council did have a few questions shared that evening. So this evening and in your packet or online, we included this report. You will see also that there are some appendices that we also attached for you to take a look at. I anticipate this will take you a little while to get through. It's a lot of material. And so there is that all to be taking a look at, and we will be having more information. There is yet kind of another portion to this study that is forthcoming that Sharon's partner, Justin, that she has contracted is going to be providing us a report more on the policy strategy suggestions. In that, we've touched base with him, and I think we anticipate that he'll send something to us as staff probably mid to late next week. So that will also be something that we'll be adding and certainly bringing to the commission. So enough with me. Sharon is here this evening with us, and I am going to turn it over to her and let her, I think, give you a little bit, get you back going after the first meeting, and then carry you forward to the newest information. And then certainly we'll have time for questions also. So to that, Sharon is with us here, and I will turn it over.
Thank you, Annette. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your evening to go through the residential target market analysis. And again, my name is Sharon Woods. I'm based out of Langsburg, which is in Clinton County, Michigan. Again, Annette kind of alluded to my background. I always like to explain when I'm working so close to my own backyard, how was it possible that you hired a consultant that basically is working in your backyard? I actually started my career in Minneapolis. I've lived in Wisconsin. I've lived in Ohio. I came to Michigan 20 years ago, so I'm not Michigan native. I have 30 years experience doing market research and analysis, and it's just kind of coincidence that I ended up living so close to the city of East Lansing. I've always wanted to do a market study for the city. So I'm really excited and pleased at this opportunity to help you and to help the community as well. So I wanted to highlight a couple of things that Annette already nicely said, but just to kind of reinforce it, is that this is really the beginning of a conversation, of our conversation. This is not the end of the road. I'm not done with my work, and I'm not going to disappear and not be available after today. This is really to kind of start the conversation and start the dialogue. So I'm here as your consultant, and here reachable, through Annette or through Tom. By all means, I'm here to answer questions. I might pop up at additional meetings, wherever you decide you want me to be to help continue this conversation and this discussion. I will be there. So let's see, yes, it has been a couple of months, and thanks for your patience while we just kind of crunched through the data and got the work done. We are going to review today the residential target market analysis. There is also a housing strategic plan, and Annette already said that Justin's working on that, and he's making some refinements to his draft. So everything is still in draft form. There's nothing final yet. Tonight, I really want to hear your reaction, your response to some of the data, and listen to your questions. I might not be able to answer all of your questions tonight. I will do my best, but if not, I might circle back around and try to answer them later. Also, there may be you might have some questions that might fall outside of the scope of what we were even contracted to do. And we welcome your questions, absolutely. And there's no such thing as a bad question ever, right? But if it's outside of the scope, we'll just be honest about that as well. So what I will do today is share my screen, and I'm going to walk you through the residential target market analysis. And let's see, there are 3 appendices that go with this report. I'm not going to take you through every page because that would take us it would take us all night, possibly. At your own leisure, I would really encourage you to anticipate about 2 hours. I find that 2 hours is a good rule of thumb on the amount of time it would take for you to really go through the documents and study the information and derive from the information kind of some of your own observations. I encourage you to look for correlations in the data, look for relationships in the data, and I encourage you to even hypothesize a little bit and strive to formulate your own conclusions and think about what the implications are of the data for the housing market in the city of East Lansing. So we really encourage some of that cerebral, creative thinking. I couldn't possibly, I don't want to spoon feed it to you, and you wouldn't want me to do that either. So this really is intended to be I'm a guide for you and to provide you with information and to help perhaps foster and fuel additional discussion and dialogue on some tough questions that I know you're going to have. So With that, yes, spend about 2 hours on your own. So my hope tonight is that at the end of tonight, you will be comfortable enough with the material and the exhibits that I'm going to show you that you would be able to study them at your own leisure and with some confidence, knowing that when you're reading the exhibits, you're reading the information correctly. That's really one of the most important things, is that you don't feel perhaps quite so overwhelmed and just trying to process the charts and the exhibits. Is that fair? Any questions before I dive in? So I'll go ahead and share my screen then. And I'm going to go to my PDF. And someone give me a nod if you can see the title page then. Awesome, thank you so much. So this is my PDF tool here. I have 4 documents up on the screen. And the first document says residential target market analysis. It does say draft. The date was April 28th. So yes, we're already 2 weeks into almost 2 weeks into May now. The second document up here, you can see 1, 2, 3. There's 3 appendices.
Hey, Sharon.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. We do, or at least I see your screen, but I'm looking at, I think, a web browser. I don't think I'm seeing the screen that you're referring to.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yep,
Uh-oh.
I see post attendee Zoom. So you've got it set to the web, share the your web browser instead of your document that you're looking for.
And let me go back then. Let me change my setting there. Let's try this one. Is that better?
It's there.
And
Yes.
Now we see a Word document. Or I think it's
Does
Word.
the document say the City of East Lansing residential target market analysis?
Yes.
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 Awesome. And when I move my pointer, can you see my hand there?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. And there's an
Mhm.
arrow on the upper left-hand corner at about 10, 11 o'clock. I have 4 files open and I'm showing you the main market study here. There's
Okay.
also Appendix 1, 2, 3. Excellent. Thanks. I'm glad you spoke up. Didn't want to get too far into that. So Appendix 1 real quickly says TMA resources. So watch they all kind of look very similar, right? But Appendix 1 is TMA resources. Appendix 2 is demographics. Appendix 3 is real estate analysis. I'm going to real quickly explain what each one is. The TMA resources is basically anytime you have a question about who would move or migrate into or within the City of East Lansing, like who are they? Are they students? Are they young professionals? Are they seniors? Who are the target markets that we should be building housing for? Then you would want to go into the TMA resources. And so those are what I call target markets. If we say we're going to go build something for seniors, then that's a target market. If we're going to build for students, then students are a target market. I'm going to come back and revisit this. The second one is demographics. And it's basically just the fundamentals of the housing market. I'll explain that as well. The third is a real estate analysis. This is basically a detailed study that we did of existing choices that are for lease or for sale within the City of East Lansing. So think of Appendix 3 as kind of like, this is the supply. If somebody did wanted to move into East Lansing and hunted for a place to rent or buy, this is what they would be able to find. And that information is in Appendix 3. Appendix 2 is kind of the most basic. I'm going to jump right into Appendix 2 here and kind of get Appendix 2 out of the way. I'm going to jump to PDF page 8 in that document, which is the header for Section A. And real quickly, I want to show you that the fundamentals of doing a housing study, there are basically kind of 3 fundamentals that I like to look at. The first is households by tenure. So we want to look at how many owners do you have? And how many renters do you have? The second one will be, what is their income? And we have to split that by owners and renters as well. And you can see how very different they are. The owners are on the top, the renters are on the bottom. Again, remember, I'm going very fast because I'm just trying to give you a guide on how to read the exhibits, and you can study this data at your leisure at another day. And I'm going to go really fast through some of this because there's a lot of meat here that I really want to get. I want to get to the meat. I want to get to the questions that you're asking, like, what is the market potential then? Well, who should we be building for? I want to get to all of that stuff. So households by tenure, how many owners you have, how many renters. You can see a lot of renters outweighing the number of owners. The owners have much higher incomes than the renters. And then we also have home values and contract rents. So values are on the top, contract rents are on the bottom. And actually I have gross rents in here as well. So the bigger number here in 2020, the median gross rent is $1,025. The median contract rent is only $25 less. The gross rent usually includes utilities and extras. The reason why there's such a small difference between the two numbers is that you have so much student housing. And so for so much of that student housing, utilities are included in the contract rent. So usually I see a $100 to $150 spread between contract and gross rent, because usually in other markets where you don't have a lot of student housing, usually utilities are extra. That's an extra cost. In this case, it's just not the case. I also have data in here on population because I always like to tie it back to the census. But when we're talking about housing, I always look at households. So if you're ever wondering, is she looking at population or households? Almost without exception, I'm looking at households, not population. So I have the data in here in dark blue. I want to clarify also that when you see dark blue, usually the data is for the city of East Lansing. And I abbreviate it to make my title nice and big. It just says East Lansing. I really encourage you to read the second line of every title. Hunt for that second line and really read it so that you know what the data is that's on the page. So I also, sometimes I'll have other data for other geographies on the same chart. So in this case, I had room to add Ingham County. So I had East Lansing in dark blue, easy to spot. If you see gray, it's usually because it's for some other geography. And that's kind of a real good clue. If we go into section B, I have similar data. Actually, I'm going to jump off over B and go into section C. You can see all the charts in section C are gray because they're all Ingham County. So I would really encourage you to compare the data between the city of East Lansing with the averages for Ingham County, because you have it in Appendix 2. It's all there. And then we also have the data for the state of Michigan, and that's also in gray. So always, I've got the geography up here in the title, always. And always the owners are on the top, the renters are on the bottom. So you can start doing comparisons. And this is where I really encourage you. We could spend an hour just comparing these market parameters on how East Lansing measures up to the county and to the state. And we just don't have time. So we'll save that for another discussion. We'll save it for questions if you like. Any questions before I jump to Appendix 3? So I'm going to keep going. Appendix 3, as I mentioned before, is an inventory of what's currently on offer in the market. And in section A, which starts on PDF page 9, I have the owners, and I want to make sure that I am going to read. I'm going to pause here and make sure that I read this correctly. So this first scatter plot is data for DeWitt Township and Meridian Township. And the second scatter plot is the city of East Lansing. And here I split it detached and attached. And I'm going to pause on this chart and explain the X and Y axis. So the X axis shows the available unit in square footage. So I actually went into like realtor.com and Trulia and apartments.com. And we also hunted diligently through apartment buildings and property manager websites. And, we did a lot of internet research, and we also followed up with phone calls to garner this data. I want to clarify also that this data, if we read the title, it's for sale units only on these two scatter plots. So again, the first one is DeWitt Meridian Township, and it says for sale. And they're both houses and some attached formats. So you do have some owner, for sale duplexes, for example. So that's all, I'm trying to capture all of those. We know that you have a lot more than this number of units. I mean, if one dot is an observation, one dot is something that's for sale in the market. So we don't have the data for every unit in the market. We only have the data for the units that are for sale, on offer, and for sale. So again, the x-axis is the square footage of that unit. So for example, here's one unit that was for sale, and it's about 1,100 square feet. And I did the math. I calculated the asking price divided by the square footage of the unit. So basically it shows us that if I plot it on this chart, we're at about 67, maybe 75, if I'm generous, $75 per square foot is the asking price per square foot. I'm kind of spending time on this because I want to highlight a relationship here. It may be hard to see if you're not accustomed to working with the data, but I work with this a lot, and I know right away that there's a pattern in the data, and it kind of looks like a ski slope. So my hand up here is at the top of the ski slope, and it kind of swoops down like this. There's a relationship between the unit size and the price per square foot. There's another steeper slope kind of in here. I can kind of see another slope. So there's kind of a special group up here where the unit sizes are fairly large and the prices are $200 or more per square foot, which is pretty generous. And then there's another kind of group in here. I would consider these to be fairly moderate, whereas these units have some sort of a premium that's getting their price per square foot up nice and high. So in general, there's a relationship where the smaller units have a lower price. The smaller units have a higher price per square foot, and larger units have a lower price per square foot. So these are the for sale units, and I'm going to jump past this because I want to show you next the charts, similar charts on the for rent and the for lease units, what's available in the market for rent and for lease. So again, first I ran it for Meridian Township, DeWitt Township, and the city of DeWitt. And I just wanted to share this data with you because I thought it might be interesting for you to have these other geographies just as a comparison. On the exact same scale, so again, these are all for lease units now. I've shifted from for sale to for lease. The next chart is the city of East Lansing, and you can see how deep we dove into your market to try to garner every possible available for lease, for rent unit. I will clarify in here, because the data was so deep, that we excluded subdivided houses. We really focused on attached formats only. So I really encourage you to carefully read the title before you try to dive into the data too much. And also watching for the geography. So each dot is an observation. We did do the analysis twice. I actually did the analysis first in November, and then we did it again in January. So that's part of the reason why there's so many dots. Maybe, I would say maybe 2/3 of these were actually available at any given time. There's also a premium market sector in here. Like right in here, I see a premium ski slope. And I can even see a premium ski slope in here. So my guess is that these are probably student rentals. And I know that student housing is going to get a premium. When developers build student housing, they're going to get the rent per bed or the rent per head. And that's a higher premium than renting a unit to a family and just saying we're renting the entire unit per month. So if it's not student housing, it's probably in here, more in the moderate kind of ski slope. And you can see that relationship is really strong. Where if you were to rent a 400 square foot unit, you might end up paying $2.50 a square foot in rent. On a square footage basis, that's pretty high. If you rent a place that's 1,200 square feet, you might only pay $1.25 a square foot. So this relationship is important in working with developers and helping them understand how to right size units. Explaining to developers that it's not always good to supersize every unit. We often have developers who they all want to be in the luxury market. And they kind of have this perception. I'm trying to kind of break down this notion that I hear this a lot from developers, and I'll tell you, half my clients are developers, so I'm not picking on them. They're my friends, but I often say the same thing to them, that look, if you're finding it hard to make the project pencil financially, the answer isn't to build larger units with luxury price points in order to presumably offset your costs. It might actually be a better strategy to build more units that are smaller with lower rents, that are units that will be absorbed faster, and you will actually get more rent per square foot on the smaller units. Usually they will respond by saying, but I have to build more kitchens. If I build 10 small units instead of 5 large units, then I have to build 10 kitchens, and those are expensive too. And I still will ask them to test the financials and test the analysis and see if they can't find a way to make it work, because we know smaller units absorb faster. So that's pretty much, there's lots of tables in here that list all the units that we actually looked at. I actually want to highlight for you, I'm not going to spend any time on those data tables, but we also did an assessment of amenities that are advertised by buildings within the city of East Lansing. So we did an inventory of 174 buildings. And what we did is we gave them a point, just 1 point, a score, as a positive, if they were marketing and advertising any of these amenities actively through the internet. So we didn't necessarily call them to check to see if they actually had all these amenities. We didn't drive by the building and do a survey to figure out if they actually have a swimming pool. We didn't try to do that. All we did was we visited their website or visited their advertisement of units online. And if they said that they had a swimming pool, then they got the point. It's really a survey of online marketing of amenities without actually having field verified all of the amenities. So what we're really looking for is, what are they selling? What are they advertising? How are they competing? That's really how to use this. So out of 174, 121 of them marketed and advertised that they have air conditioning. So we know if a developer or if anyone were to build new rental units in East Lansing, they should probably advertise that they have air conditioning, because otherwise they're not going to be very competitive. And the other popular things is that there's off-street parking. So there's some sort of a parking lot. There's a laundry facility, washer, dryer, balcony, patio, fitness center. And whether they're furnished, whether you can get a lease for less than 12 months, hardwood floors, downtown location, in other words, being walkable. Those are all really competitive things for developers that want to really differentiate themselves from the competition and truly be unique. Things like rooftop patios or plazas, vaulted ceilings, and being near a fitness trail, having a parking deck, outdoor ball courts, courtyards, stainless steel appliances. Those are more rare. So again, I'm not going to dwell a whole lot more on that, but I will pause and see if anyone has questions.
Let me ask one very brief question. Given the time period when this was when the analysis was done, how Well, do you think that these findings are representative, given the fact that these data were collected during a period in which there was a lot of uncertainty about whether students would be renting, or should say anybody would be renting in the near future, considering the impact of COVID? Does that have any impact here?
Absolutely, and that's a really good question. And I wanted to also, one thing I forgot to say at the beginning of this session was that if there are things questions like that you think, you would like us to study further, just kind of take note of some of those items and maybe have a conversation with Annette and Tom about whether those are things that we should try to address, in an update of the report. That what you just brought up was something that we knew going into the study. We knew that going into the study. And so it has been discussed already whether, should we go back and try to do another pass on the data and see if the number of available units has significantly contracted, and have the rents, has the supply tightened up, and have the rents increased? And if so, how would that impact what these charts might look like? So we're definitely tuned into it, and it's something that we could possibly, do an update later if that's something you feel strongly about, that you feel that it's really important, something to talk about.
This is Irene. I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I read through as much as I could of your report, and it was really detailed, that's for sure. But one question I have is, and I'm not sure if it's in there, is like in the city of Lansing, they started building apartments, and they also actually did it at the Bailey, the Liberty Hyde Bailey. They wind up having rentals that the people have to pay for their heat now. So I was wondering, do you have that in there anywhere? Because that really does make a difference, that people have their own heat unit attached to their apartment, and that significantly drives up the price. I was wondering if that's in there.
Oh, I'm sorry, that heat as a utility is included, or that there's a heated storage unit adjacent?
No, like the Liberty Hyde Bailey apartments. I think there's 32 apartments there, and 5 are market rate and the rest are income qualified. Well, everybody that moved in there has their own heating unit and air conditioning unit. It's not part of the overall building.
I see. Got it.
And that's becoming a trend. And I'm really concerned about that going forward for people renting. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Good question. And we did try, I do think that we tried to address that in the amenities here. So 23 of the 170 buildings, 174 buildings, let's see, 23 of them advertised that heat and electric were included. Only 23. I was really surprised that it was so low, actually. So that implies that, the others either weren't advertising it, or that heat and electric is actually extra. But when I looked at, when I looked before earlier during tonight's discussion, and I saw that gross rent is only $25 higher than contract rent, it kind of tells me that probably more of these buildings than what they're advertising, probably more of them than not, are including utilities.
Sharon, I have a question. I noticed that you don't need pet-friendly amenities, or there's no pet-friendly amenities, but there are a lot of pet owners in East Lansing.
So yes, as we were going through the analysis and trying to identify the amenities that we wanted to score, and I just realized that I have a typo that I need to fix. That should say footnote, not footnor. So pet friendly, so many of the buildings advertised that they were pet friendly. It was almost like every building without exception, that I kind of knew that if I scored it, probably 160 of the buildings would be pet friendly. It didn't really stand out as a unique amenity. So we didn't try to track it. Any other questions? And again, those are things that, you know, if you feel strongly about it, that we should go back and do an update, we could certainly add it in an update. So I'm going to dive into Appendix 1. This is the first appendix, and this includes information that you saw 2 months ago when we started the intro. I already had some of these exhibits, I believe, and I believe that I shared them with you. In section A of Appendix 1, on page 11 is the header. And then right after that, there's a 2-page table. And again, these are the lifestyle clusters that are currently living in the city of East Lansing. There's 71 of them. This was part of the intro a couple of months ago. I'll just kind of jog your memory by being a little redundant here, if you don't mind. There's 71 of them. The first half are on the first page. The second half are on the second page. And again, number 1, American royalty, they're the richest of the rich. And number 71, they are the poorest of the poor in general. And the green here is the colleges and cafes group, 053. So they rank, think of it as they rank in income also as kind of 53rd in place out of 71. There are 7,359 households that are colleges and cafes. These do not include the dormitories. They do not include on-campus students. And right below them is the striving singles. They're closely affiliated with the colleges and cafes. So they may be recent grads, or maybe they're family members working full-time and maybe going to school in the evening or doing online classes, you know, any variety of reasons why they're not quite being picked up in the colleges and cafes category. But because it's so prevalent, it kind of shadows the scale of all the other households living in the city of East Lansing. I'm going to go back to the first page. In general, I think I said this a couple of months ago as well. In general, the ones on this page, and I even say it here, they tend to have better to upper incomes. Most of them are homeowners. Most are families. Most live in suburban type settings, and most are settled. It includes some students. So you might actually have a few students that are just kind of scattered in here, like status seeking singles. You know, they may be students, but maybe they just somehow got picked up into a different bucket, a different lifestyle cluster. Each household goes into only one bucket. So you could argue that, wait a minute, I'm a little bit that cluster, but I'm also a little bit that cluster. So how does Experian decide which bucket I go into? Well, they kind of do an average of all the households on your block, and they kind of allocate that block to one bucket. So it's not a perfect science, but it gives us a really good sense of who's in the city of East Lansing. So if we take the students out, 7,359 households, the second most prevalent group is full pockets, empty nests, and they rank 19th in income. And then the third most prevalent is family fantastic, 1,046 households. That's how many households you have. And then I believe that the striving singles is 764 households that's currently living in the city of East Lansing. I also ran the math by looking at percents. So the first 2 charts I was looking at, those are the actual number of households. The next 2 pages are percents. The reason I did this is I wanted to compare how you measure up against Ingham County averages. So I calculated percents for Ingham County, percents for East Lansing, And then I kind of layered them on top of each other. And I'm going to zoom in on one of these so you can see it a little better. For example, No Place Like Home. The light blue is Ingham County. So in Ingham County, about 4% of Ingham County households are in the No Place Like Home lifestyle cluster. In East Lansing, 3% of your households are in that group. In Aging in Place, about 5% of Ingham County's households are aging in place, and 4% of your households are aging in place. Where we see the data, like there's no blue, there's no light blue at all, it's because it's eclipsed. Like the city of East Lansing is just kind of layered on top, so you can't really see the light blue bars. So like 13% of your households are full pocket empty nest. And for Ingham County, I'm not sure what the percent is, I just know that you eclipse them. What's really interesting is to look for the ones that are in Ingham County, but they don't really show up very prevalently for the city of East Lansing. Like the stock cars and state parks, I can see that this is about 3% of Ingham County's residents, households are in stock cars and state parks lifestyle cluster, and less than 1% of your households is in that group.
Sharon, can I, this is Larry, can I, just a brief question.
Yep.
Are the data for the city of, for Ingham County excluding the city of East Lansing?
No.
Or no, so it is all of Ingham County, regardless of residents in or out of the city of East Lansing. And then the city of East Lansing is just overlaid separately.
Correct.
Okay, so, all right, so Ingham County data do include East Lansing, okay.
Correct.
The reason I say that is because I imagine if they were done separately, that some of the differences would be a lot more, might be more striking.
Possibly, slightly more striking, because they're percents, it probably would just barely move the needle. It would move the needle just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I have some other technical questions about Experian and lifestyle segmentation, but I'll do that offline sometime, okay?
Sure.
I don't wanna, that's boring stuff for most people.
That's okay. You can give me a call. I'll answer your questions.
Sure.
So there's a couple here on the second page. So these are the relatively more moderate lifestyle clusters. In fact, these guys are really market rate, to be honest. And maybe down in here, we start to get into low income. In the market rate category, I'm really interested in these two clusters here, where 4 or 5 or 6% of Ingham County's households are rooted flower power, and 4% are infants and debit cards, but they just barely make a blip in this for the city of East Lansing. So I don't even get 1%. You know, when I do the math, it's like, it's not even 1%. So that would tell me that maybe they're good target markets for you. If, you know, we already know that they're living in Ingham County, but for some reason they're bypassing the city of East Lansing. And it very well could be that it's just, it's difficult for them to enter the market. You know, they can't, the prices are not attainable or tolerable for them, even though they're market rate, or, you know, maybe around 80% of area median income, if you like to think of it that way. But certainly that would be one area where we could certainly diversify. When I see a small percent, like, okay, just 1% in Ingham County or rural Southern Bliss, would I consider them to be a target market for East Lansing? It's riskier because it's already such a tiny percent. You know, it's like taking, you know, it's like trying to take a quarter of a penny. You know, but if I have $1, maybe I can take a quarter of $1. Now I have something to work with. So that's how I see that data. There's other exhibits in here that I think are interesting that I'd like to explain. I've explained them before. I want to explain them again. These in the next section, section B, let me explain how to read these charts. All of the percents are Michigan averages. It shows the share of Michigan households that are singles without children in 2019. So pre-COVID. And the way to read that, for example, the jet set urbanites across the state of Michigan, 44% of this group, they're singles without children. And striving singles, you can tell by the name, 73% of this group, they're singles without children. So nothing's ever perfect. You can't quite say striving singles never have children, because actually almost a quarter of them do have children. So each lifestyle cluster even has variety within that group. The ones that are dark blue, I identified as target markets for the city of East Lansing. Either because they're target markets because they either already live here and they have good movership rates, or they already live in Ingham County and they're almost on your doorstep anyway. And they might not quite be in East Lansing, but if we built the right thing for them, they would respond favorably by snapping it up. And that would be something other than student housing. So the dark blue, you can find them real easily. Who are your target markets? Full pockets, empty nests. And 65% of them are singles without children. Status seeking singles, 66% are singles without children. So let's pick one of these groups. Let's pick one from this chart. I talked about rooted flower power, infants and debit cards. We could pick one of those. Let's just look at rooted flower power, L42. Let me hope that I actually highlighted that. I did. Here they are. Rooted flower power. I highlighted it in dark blue because I said it's one of your target markets. Even though they're not quite in East Lansing, they're in Ingham County and they're on your doorstep. So they're a target market for you. And 57% of them are singles without children. I'm gonna go faster now through the rest of these sheets. Let's watch the rooted flower power, L42. L42, 9% move each year. That's not very high compared to these other groups like Full Steam Ahead, 60% of them move every year. Striving Singles, 50% of them move every year. So again, rooted flower power, just 9%, 1 in 10 move every year. And rooted flower power, 50% of them will choose a metro area or an urban place. And only 8% will rent. And the last one, oops, I jumped ahead there somehow. The last one, when they buy a home, only 6% would look for something that's attached, like a duplex or a triplex. Most of them are going to buy a home and they're looking for something that's detached. So I can also go into these other exhibits here in section C. I have the home buyers and I have more detailed profiles. I remember showing you these maps last time. Here's Platinum Prosperity. I want to find the rooted flower power again, see if I can find where they are. Bear with me. My mouse is being a little slow. There they are. So this is why I've identified them as a target market for you, is that I kept saying, well, they're on your doorstep. Now, these maps are really not great for like trying to find your address and like trying to, like deduce, where are the residents living around, where in my neighborhood. They're not that refined. And I can't really get much more detailed than the large block groups that you see here. But in general, you can kind of see that rooted flower power, they're living throughout Ingham County and throughout the city of Lansing and really this whole geography, this inner belt area, they're all over, but somehow they they cannot quite find prices that are attainable or tolerable in East Lansing. So, you know, one of the initial objectives of this study was to help you and the city figure out if you wanted to diversify. We're not saying, you know, push the students out or never build more student housing ever again. That's not what we're saying, but we are trying to answer the question of if you diversify your housing stock and choose to work with developers who are willing to work with you on that diversification type strategy, these are the target markets that you could intercept and compete for. That's really what this is intended to do. So there's also charts that look like this so that we can get to know the rooted flower power a little bit better. There's also a narrative. So there's lots of discussion in here about everything from what kind of media, what kind of music they listen to what magazines they read and how they like to shop if you want to get into the shopping. I peeled off out of 20 pages of data on just the rooted flower power alone, 20 pages of data. I pulled out a few variables that are most relevant to the housing market. So here you can see in the upper right-hand corner that 90% are homeowners, only 10% are renters. Of the owners, 90%, only 4% move in any given year. Only 10% are renters. However, 14% of those renters move every year. The owners, most of them are choosing to buy houses, detached units down here. And in fact, that's really the case with most of these lifestyle clusters and target markets for East Lansing on the owner side, is that most of them will buy a detached house. And they might, let me clarify that these are national averages. So now in East Lansing, I might argue that the percents could be a little higher because the prices in East Lansing are high. And so we know that there is a little bit more of a dynamic in East Lansing where families might be willing to actually buy half a duplex just to have an East Lansing address. You know, and that's a higher inclination than the national average. But at least you get a sense that in general, across the nation, rooted flower power, they usually like to buy detached houses. Questions, Larry?
Sharon, I have another very quick question. Where do condominiums fit in to this?
Yep, so condominiums are a form of ownership. They're not a building size. So these charts are focused on building size. And typically I think of, so we use townhouses and condos kind of interchangeably. But I would usually say a condo, a condo could be a townhouse, a condo could be in a small multiplex or even a larger multiplex. But ultimately a condo is really just a form of ownership.
Right, but I guess the question is when you mentioned that this particular group at least nationally prefers single family dwellings that are separate from all others. So, so that would exclude condominiums.
It would exclude, yes, it would exclude owner occupied attached units. That may be a condo form of ownership or not. But you are absolutely right that right now the national trend, what I'm seeing really in most cities across Michigan is that most homeowners, if they could buy a house that's detached, they would. If they can't afford it, they might be willing to buy a townhouse or half of a duplex, but that's not really what their preference usually is, unless you're in a special market like Petoskey or Charlevoix or Leelanau Peninsula, where maybe you're a snowbird and you're really, you're going to be there half the year. You want zero maintenance. You want to be able to, turn the furnace off, lock it up, and go to Florida for 6 months. So only in special markets.
Right.
There are other special markets where we'll see it, like when there's an amenity or a vista view that comes at a high premium. So a vista view that might be a lake, like lakefront, or a vineyard or a fairway on a golf course, those sorts of places, or a ski slope. So you may see for sale owner occupied attached townhouses that may be condominiumized, but usually they're in special places like that. I've seen them tested in downtowns, on riverfronts and downtowns, even in Michigan. And it's risky, I'll say, because I've seen kind of hit or miss. I've seen some projects that try to go to urban places and build, especially owner occupied lofts. Chances are, if it's not really, really special, you're going to end up renting them anyway. Just a word of caution, not a rule of thumb, but as a caution.
Well, and I don't mean to dominate this, but one of the reasons I brought it up is because one of the major lifestyle groupings here is the empty nesters. And as empty nesters are getting older and looking to downsize, I know that in some condominium, actually in several that I'm familiar with in this area, older empty nesters make up a significant portion of the residents. So I know that that's maybe unique, or maybe not unique, but I know that's something that actually goes on around here to a certain degree, maybe more than the average. I don't know.
Yep. So here's where you see it. Like, this is just one example on the target markets: full pockets, empty nests.
Mhm.
And you can still see, that still more than half would still choose, maybe they downsize into a smaller house. But yeah, they do tend to start migrating into larger building formats. And
Okay.
And
This is Janine.
25% might be renters, 75% are still going to own. So it varies group by group. These are, let's see if I can find another one. No, sorry, that's probably the best one among the target markets for East Lansing. But yeah,
Okay.
good point.
I have some questions.
Sure.
This is Janelle Cannon. Sharon, just so you know, I can't see anything on your screen. I'm a blind member of the commission. So at some point, I'm going to ask for you to strip out a lot of what you're presenting and just send me the text. I've read through everything I can, and I had the pleasure of watching your presentations at the council meeting. I went online and listened to that, and I think we are really lucky to have you here in our backyard. I'm just fascinated by this, and it is on the continuum of many of us who served on the Age-Friendly Communities Project. So my question is one of your objectives to help the city plan, for the needs of the future populations? I'm sure you know that the fastest demographic that's growing is people 80 and 85 and older. And they are building resort assisted living developments around here like crazy. And are they represented in your findings? And I have a personal opinion about that. There's developers are building them because they make lots and lots of money from people living there. And it's not necessarily where people of modest means can have their grandma and grandpa. Because we're talking about, if it's a buy-in community, anywhere from starting at the low end of 165,000 to buy in up to upwards of 500,000 to buy in. And then it's like, $3,000 a month.
Yep.
In addition to that. And those assets, if you were somebody who managed to build your 401k, you'd probably like to pass that on to some of your kids or grandkids. I know we would, and what limited assets we have, we'd like to pass them on to our family, not to developers. So that's a question we had in the age-friendly community folks that were studying this issue. And every day there's 10,000 people turning 65 and older until I think 2035.
Mhm.
And when you were charged for this study, did that come up, like how do we plan for the future and what their needs are? And when I read through your report, I read a lot of the nomenclature that I get most excited about: accessory dwellings and cottage courtyards, co-housing and things of that nature that can be options for people who don't want to spend all of their money, if they have it even,
Mhm.
on these assisted living arrangements.
Yep. So thank you. That's a really good question. And that's a tough question. I'll be honest. I've done some senior assisted living housing studies recently in Michigan,
Mhm.
and I have found that if the city's policies enable development of a lot of, senior assisted living type housing formats, that the developers, you are absolutely correct that it can be a lucrative business. And that the developers, I've seen them kind of migrate to the communities that have, the most lenient policies in place that allow that kind of development.
Mhm.
So I did a study for West Bloomfield Township, for example, where they didn't even realize that they had accidentally incentivized developers to come to West Bloomfield Township and actually build assisted independent living type residential units. And they couldn't figure out why they had a disproportionate high share of the region's senior units in their community. And it's like, well, they had practically incentivized it. So it is something that definitely should be talked about as a policy for the city of East Lansing, and to definitely vet that. I will say also, so you are absolutely right that I've seen the rents on assisted living, be, and even semi-independent, be everywhere from 5 to 6 to 7,000 a month.
Sure.
So that's not unheard of. And so that can be lucrative. Of course, it is expensive to offer assistance with daily needs, so that as a service can be expensive, but still it can be a really lucrative model.
The ones that I know, that's extra. They charge for that.
Right.
If you need a personal care attendant, that's all on, the person. If you need medical care of any kind, that's all extra. That's not included in living in that community. And the other thing I'm so concerned about is, assisted living is a marketing tool. There are no state statutes that govern that.
Right. So I'm not a big fan. I'll tell you that I am a bit biased. I'm not a big fan of the senior assisted living facilities.
I'm not either.
I'm not a fan, and you haven't biased me. I went into it. I'm being very honest and letting you know that I'm a bit biased, partly because I haven't done a detailed analysis of that for the city of East Lansing. I have not. My general observation was that in the city of East Lansing, I actually don't see a whole lot of, I didn't come upon that much of it really. And my perception is that there wasn't really an over prevalence of senior assisted living in the city of East Lansing. Maybe I missed it.
I can probably think of 5 that have opened in the last 2-3 years.
Okay.
And I know the MSU is building a buy-in community on land, on the south side of town, and that's going to be another one.
So maybe Annette could help me by just doing a real quick review of the real estate analysis and making sure that I didn't overlook those, Annette, and making sure that I have those, that we can find those 5 on the list, and that I have them appropriately tagged, because I'm only human and imperfect.
Oh, of course.
And possible I just don't remember them.
Well, I just live with some of them. Some of my neighbors live right down the street from me in like Independence Village. And that's, I think, $4,500 a month.
Right.
And let me tell you, they have had, I cry for the people that lived there this past year
Mhm.
because they locked those people in their rooms.
Yeah, they locked it down. Yeah.
They turned off any of their kitchen things. They couldn't use the hot plates in their rooms, and they brought them trays just like they were prisoners.
Yeah. So real quickly, the other challenges, I have two other challenges with that format. The first is the building format. I think of them as kind of the big box of housing.
Yes, yes.
You know, and the second is that I think there's a lot of media hype behind this notion. The media is really fanning the flames on, you know, we absolutely, you're right that Americans are living longer in life, staying active later in life. And we're able to live to a more seasoned age.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be more active. So we're looking for places to live that help us feel socially connected. And the media is kind of fanning the flames of that, kind of promoting it as this big national trend. When I look at the data, I see little blips in the data. I'm like, yeah, we're living a little bit longer. And yeah, we're a little more active a little later in life. And so we don't necessarily want to sell our homes and move into, assisted living. In fact, so let me finish my train of thought, because I was just going down another path that I wanted to make another point. So I think sometimes media grabs hold of these ideas, and then the more they talk about it, the more we believe that it's true. And then when I run the data, I'm like, but the numbers aren't as deep as media would have us believe.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that age in place housing, the path I was starting to go down, is that I believe that age in place housing was really intended to be applied to this idea that we help seniors live in their current homes as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And we started taking this nomenclature of age in place housing and applying it to this concept that, wait, we should convince anyone who's 55 and older that it's time to sell their house and move into an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And move into independent living so that they can migrate through the system. And I'm not convinced that that's really a good model. I'm not sold on the notion that we should convince all of our seniors to sell their houses and move into assisted living apartments and then move that product onto the market. Because I think, anyhow, we could have an hour discussion on this, and
Mm-hmm.
I will let you, please comment on what I just said, but then I think I'll go into the main report, if you don't mind.
No, I just quickly say, my husband and I are one of those couples. We did sell our home that we built in Meridian Township and lived there for 30 years. And we moved into private pay or market value apartment here in East Lansing. At the time, it was the only one available. There was none in Meridian Township and only one here in East Lansing. And we moved in here. And by the way, heat and water, it's common for that to be included, but not electrical in this type of situation. Because these buildings are heated with a boiler.
Mm-hmm.
So your air conditioner and running your refrigerator and that's your electric bill. And that's
Right.
separate. But there are many, many people, and we were among those who we didn't want to keep spending money on paying others to do the things like snow plowing and lawn mowing and eaves trough cleaning and painting and, just general maintenance. As homeowners, I'm sure all of you know, it's a job that never ends.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so the lure is that you'll move into an apartment and you don't have to worry about dragging your dumpster out to the curb and all of that stuff.
Yep.
So
Yep.
thank you. I think this is a divine study and I'm fascinated by it. And by the way, we have kids and grandkids and soon to be a great granddaughter that live in the Zumbro Falls area. And my son works in Lake City. There,
So,
soda.
so, yeah, I really appreciate, thank you for your support. I really appreciate that. And you're doing exactly what, what I'm hoping you'll do is to kind of really chew on the data and,
Mhm.
look for those, search for those implications out of what I've written in the report, and you're absolutely asking the right questions. And I can see Annette's taking some notes so that we can come back and visit whether any of those questions need to be vetted, more thoroughly or not. So thank you, Janelle. And I'm going to jump into the main report and take us into the main document, which has the longest narrative and the most discussion about, the conclusions and the data observations. And I will clarify again that it's a fairly technical report. Most of the recommendations, I should say all of the recommendations about things like, well, what are the policy implications of all of this? That's all being addressed in the housing strategic plan that Justin Sprague is working on. So you're not going to find anything in here that says, here's a policy thing that, here's a policy change that needs to be made, or we think you should do exactly this in this exact location. We're not quite ready for those kinds of discussions. The narrative is intended to just be a guide, just like what I'm doing this evening. It's a guide to navigate you through the exhibits and explain how to read the exhibits. And you probably picked up on that already. So I'm going to jump into, let's see, before I jump into the conclusions, I want to make sure that I haven't left anything else out that might, there's one other thing that I want to highlight, and that is this concept of the movership rates again. So I'm in section E in the main report, and section E starts on PDF page 67. And right behind that, I have 2 pages that compare different movership rates among different demographics. The reason why I dwell on this data is that it's a really important part of the analytics and the metrics and the model that I use to calculate what the market potential is for each unique place, including East Lansing. So at the top of this page that I'm showing right now, I've zoomed in on it a little bit. I'm showing that in general, across the state of Michigan, all renters in the state of Michigan, which is in gray, 29% of all renters move every year. That's the movership rate. It's just the share of households that move. And 8% of owners across the state of Michigan move each year. So it basically says that renters move 3 times as often as owners do. So when a family that has 2 wage earners buys a house, their inclination to move again goes way down. Whereas when a renter rents a place and signs a lease, their inclination to end that lease and make another move is really high. 1/3 of them move again the next year. They just don't stay. So buying a house with a family, we kind of it's a lifestyle attribute that we're leaning towards being relatively settled. The second chart on that same page shows something that's correlated, which is marital status. So renters tend to be singles, and singles also have higher movership rates than married couples. And it's all correlated. These variables are all linked. Once we become married, we tend to have 2 wage earners, which means we're more affluent, which means we can buy a house, which means we purchase a home, and then we're less settled. We're more settled, less inclined to move. It's all correlated. And it correlates on the next page. I do another comparison by income. So the lower income households have higher movership rates. And then also younger households, where the head of householder is young, they also have the highest movership rates. What I haven't said yet is that in East Lansing, the movership rates are exceptionally high, and that is because of the university students. So university students, 80% of them move every year. And actually the striving singles are the status seeking singles. They also have exceptionally high movership rates. So with 80% of students moving every year, and so many of them being renters, I said before, 29% of Michigan's renters move every year. Well, for the city of East Lansing, 65% of your renters move every year because they're students. So many of them are students. And in Michigan, 19% of single householders move every year. Well, in East Lansing, 61% move every year. 60% of all the singles move every year. So those differences are really an important part of the model, and that gets applied to every lifestyle cluster when I do the analysis. There's other stuff in here that I will let you browse at your leisure. If I'm skipping over it, it's because it wasn't really critical. It wasn't a real critical part of the reaching the conclusions, which is what is the market potential then for the city of East Lansing? And I'm going to jump to that next. I'm going to start with section B, as in boy, with PDF page 44. So section B focuses on the market potential among owner-occupied units. And just so you know, the next section, section C, focuses on the renters. So let's just start with the owners. And I'm going to jump to PDF page 47 and snap to size it here for you. What I've done on page 47 is I'm showing you the conclusion of my model where, and I'm going to kind of describe how my model works kind of left to right. If you imagine that my model is actually just a big Excel spreadsheet. And my Excel spreadsheet has 71 rows of data. So every one of the 71 lifestyle clusters is in my model. And I know how many currently live in the city of East Lansing. So I can populate that in a column. I know how many households are in East Lansing. Then I also know how many are owners and how many are renters for each of those lifestyle clusters. So I can split the data. I can create 2 more columns and say, here are the renters, here are the owners. And then I also know of the renters for each lifestyle cluster. Each cluster behaves differently. I know what percent of the renters move in any given year. And I know what percent of the owners move in any given year. So I do the math. I start taking cuts on the data. It's like taking a pie and saying, well, here's all the households. Here's how many are Bohemian Groove. And of the Bohemian Groove, this is how many are renters. And of those renters, this is how many move each year. And then I also know their income. So I can look at those renters, the ones that are moving, and figure out their income. And based on their income, figure out what their tolerance or propensity is to pay various price points and contract rent. So if I know their income, I know what they will tolerate to pay in rent. I can do the same thing on home values. I can say, well, here are, I have 15 households that are Platinum Prosperity and that are also owners and that are also moving each year. And I know what their incomes are, so I know how much of a home value they will tolerate. So I've done the math in my own spreadsheet and just kind of laid it out and did the math column by column by column. The other thing that I did is I also figured out what percent of the owners would buy a house and what percent would buy something else, like a townhouse or a loft. And really in East Lansing, not very, 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 almost none of the homeowners would buy a loft. And a few would maybe buy half of the duplex or might buy a townhouse. Some might in the right location. And then on the renters, I do the same thing. On the renters, it's very different. I figure out how many renters will actually rent a house. How many will rent a duplex, triplex, fourplex, all the way up to a large multiplex. And I do all that math for you. And this sheet that I've hovered on here, I haven't moved from this page, is showing you the grand conclusion. by target market. And so I'm going to read the first row of the title says that this is the annual market potential, and clarifying the geography, it's for the city of East Lansing. So again, I just want to make sure that we're all comfortable, that we know how to read the exhibit. So the first word is annual. That means it's a one-year snapshot. The next two words say market potential. So just clarifying, this is actually the one-year market potential. It's no longer the existing households. I showed you that before in Appendix 1. Now we're looking at the market potential. The second row of the title says new. So they're brand new, which means they're migrating into the city of East Lansing. They're new households migrating into the city. And they're owners. The second word on that row says that they're owners. So it excludes the renters, and they're target markets. So it means that we're looking at the lifestyle clusters that are targets for you. I've got the year 2022 in the title as well. You know, actually I ran the data first on 2020, and then I kind of bumped it out 2 years to adjust for the fact that things were kind of, you know, tough with COVID. But really, even if you did these numbers in 2021, you could really do the numbers each year for about 5 years before we should probably go back after about 5 years, maybe go back and recalibrate or kind of refresh the data and see how we did. So in general, I like to say the data is good for about 5 years. So the paragraph on the page is also important, and it says that there are 250 new owner households that could migrate into the city of East Lansing each year. And they're ideal targets for new builds, detached formats like traditional houses. And the target markets that I'm recommending, of those 250, 22 of those households would probably be digital dependents. 21 would be full pockets, empty nests, to answer Larry's earlier question about the full pocket empty nesters. And the runner-ups then, Family Fantastic, 17. Platinum Prosperity, 15. Status Seeking Singles, 14. And smaller numbers among the other groups. So that's who, if you were able to build 250 new houses next year, these are the target markets that would probably buy them. I also said I know their income, so I did the math. I figured out what their tolerance would be to pay different home values, and that's what's on this page. So again, the title says detached housing units, the city of East Lansing, owners only, and now we're looking at values. I've got the year 2020, so these are actually, we could maybe bump these numbers up a little bit by the time we get out of COVID. I mean, the prices just everything keeps going up. We know the market prices are climbing pretty strongly right now. I want to make sure that wasn't a typo. Yeah, okay, 2020. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to pause here because this is important. It's tempting again for developers to say 250. Wow, that's such a big number. Wow, you know, that sounds really exciting. I'm going to build 250 luxury houses then. And that's where the price points become really important, is to point out to them that when I look at these charts with the green histograms to represent dollars and values, that actually the majority of those new households are really going to be looking for something that's attainably priced at maybe $350,000 or less. And in fact, 65 of those households are hoping to find something that would be $200,000 or less, which is really, really hard to find in East Lansing. So they would say, well, I can't make any money. They'll tell me, I can quote them, Sharon, I can't build a house for $200,000. I won't make any money. I'm not going to do it. And I'll say, okay, then we have to take that out of the number. You know, so tell me what you can build. And they say, well, I know that I can build 300,000. And I'll say, okay, well, we can look at this chart then and go, if you can build 300,000 or more, then you've got 20, 40, 55, 65, 75, 85, 90. We're down to 90 units that you can build that are 300,000 or more. So we start, again, we've got a pie of 250 new households looking to buy units, but we can't build the luxury units for all of them because most of them are market rate and moderate. These are the target markets that I mentioned earlier that I said are at your doorstep. And they're not quite making it into East Lansing because they can't find something that they can tolerate that's attainably priced, tolerably priced. I'm not even saying affordable because affordable has there's a whole nother nuance, right? A whole kind of another connotation. We're just saying, even if it's not affordable by HUD standards, it should at least be tolerably priced. So the challenge is that let me go up even higher in the price point. At 400,000 or higher, there are only 25 households migrating into East Lansing each year that would tolerate a price of 400,000 or more. So we can only have one developer really should be building, 25 houses in any given year. Or maybe we have 5 developers and they each build 5. That would be even better because then we have some variety. But that's the way to read these charts. And I'm going to do the same thing on the renters and then I'll pause.
Sharon, can I ask a question before we leave there?
Absolutely.
Based on what you said, am I interpreting that correctly? Like if we make the assumption that a builder, like are the builders that currently work in our Tri-County region, that they need to be able to sell a house for $300,000 or more to make it worth it for them?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but
I was like, how do we fill the gap then for those folks who between 150 and 300, there's demand for detached housing, but there's nobody like, so yeah, tell me where I missed the mark.
The gap is in what they say and what they can actually do. And part of it, the gap may be their own awareness of how to make the financials work on a smaller house. So the challenge is that in Michigan, we need an army of developers that can build moderately sized, reasonably priced houses, and we don't have an army. We lost our army during the recession. So we lost our developers and our contractors, and the ones that are left are they like to say, I'm kind of quoting them, and I hope they don't call me and say, you have to stop quoting us as saying that, because I'm being a little general. I'm generalizing here a little bit, that I often hear them say, I need to build larger units so that I can get luxury prices to offset my costs. And we're trying really, you're getting right to the point that actually we need to find developers that are willing to work with us. By us, I mean you work with the city of East Lansing to say, you know what, I can make that work. I know how to do it. I've got a model and a product. I know how to make modular homes, prefabbed homes. You can't even tell that they're prefabbed. You build them in the factory, you bring them on site and assemble them, and you can't even tell. And they're just smaller houses. They're more modestly sized, and they're
Sharon,
yes.
If any of you read Dwell magazine, there are developers out there. Are you familiar with Dwell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that magazine. I just love it. We've got to find a way to get those developers to want to do business here, being driven by what the community needs, not what the developers come to the council and say, I want to build this because I can make money doing it.
Right. So there's some markets that can be very lucrative. The assisted living senior market, the student housing market where you can price per head or per bed. And then the luxury home market where You don't have to build as many kitchens, and it's tempting to try to go out to the edges, the townships and the edges of our cities where the land is cheaper and build estate homes. And so the land is less expensive, and that's where they save the money. The challenge is that on those luxury larger homes, though, you just don't get the absorption rate. And it's the same challenge with the rental units. So there are developers out there who absolutely understand this model and understand how to build, I call it right sizing. Finding developers that will actually be partners with you and the city of East Lansing and actually build a relationship where it's symbiotic. And we could talk about how that works later, because I don't think we'll have time tonight. But think about what would you, and we could talk about that big word incentivize, but what does incentivizing mean? It's not always money. It can be time. It can be land. It can be streamlining permit review processes. It can be lots of different things. So yes, partnerships are really important. And right sizing the unit. So when we talk about the lowest price point, we could actually be talking about even cottages, cottage size homes or townhouses that are semi-attached or attached. I'm going to do the same conversation when we talk about the rental units, and I've jumped to the next page on rental prices. On the rental units, this is where we can really start talking on the low price point. I'm going to read the lowest end of the spectrum here at $550 to $600 per month, or even $450 to $500 a month. Again, the mainstream developer, typical average developer might say, I'm never going to build apartments for $450 a month. And I'm saying, well, we're not necessarily thinking that might be an apartment. It might actually be a micro loft. Or maybe it's an accessory dwelling. Or maybe, it's a cottage that someone's allowed to build in the backyard off of the big house. It could be a lot of different things. They don't all have to be apartments. They don't all have to be lofts. So imagining different building formats. The target markets are also here on the renters. So the striving singles are the biggest group. I do want to clarify that I don't have the colleges and cafes on these charts. It would just be off the chart. And it again, clarifying that the objective of the study was to identify, in addition to students, how do we diversify our mix of target markets? Who do we go after? Are they professionals? Are they seniors? Are they empty nesters? Who are they? That was the objective of the study. So I'm really focusing on target markets other than the colleges and cafes on these charts. And the biggest target market for you on the rental market is striving singles. And the second most largest is, daring to dream. They are moderate in income, moderate to low. Digital dependence, our market rate. Bohemian groove, wired for success, status seeking singles, full pockets and empty nests. I threw that one in there for Larry. So again, those price points, and again, right now I'm seeing it's in cities across Michigan, the rents, the developments that are going in are everyone's scrambling to see how many units can we build that are 900, 950, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, 1,400 a month in contract rent. But if we all play in that space, we're just going to make it tougher and tougher for the households that really can only afford $750 a month. We're just making it tougher and tougher for them. And that is a deep market for you as well. So my voice, I can feel my voice going, and I'm going to stop and invite questions. I've heard from Janelle and I've heard from Larry, and I actually have heard from all of you, I believe. So who has not asked me a question? Anyone? Then Annette, do you think that this is a good, I think real quickly, there's also some step buildings in here. I want to explain these pictures. They look like little sugar cube buildings. I call them sugar cubes. And there's 5 sheets of them, I think, maybe 6. And they're just intended to give you some pictures that you can point to when you're thinking about different building formats and kind of expand your vocabulary a little bit on imagining different formats. So we talk in Michigan a lot about cottages. There's side-by-side duplexes, row houses, triplexes, duplex, and then there's co-living, townhouses, lofts, courtyard apartments. I've also got lofts above Main Street retail and courtyards. You know, it's just to really give you images that you could point to. Accessory dwellings is the last page. Just images that you could point to if you're trying to explain to somebody what an accessory dwelling is.
What's the
I'll pause
sugar
there.
cube thing again?
Yep, those are all, I call them sugar cube buildings.
I'm trying to visualize that.
Yeah, they're little drawings, sketches really of different building formats.
Okay.
And they were actually not done by me. They were actually done by a planner who actually did them. They're computer generated. And they just went in and said, okay, well, here's what an accessory dwelling looks like. And we're just going to draw a little picture for you. And here's what a townhouse looks like. Here's a little picture.
Oh, okay.
I call them sugar cubes because sometimes we'll just pull out a map and kind of take these little pictures and move them around on a map to do, you know, as a planning exercise in a charrette. So Annette, what do you think as a facilitator and moderator? Do you want to field some more questions, or are we out of time?
No, I think, you know, if commissioners, if you do have some questions, I think now is a good time to bring them up, and not only just questions maybe for Sharon, but also if there's some items that you just want to do a little, you know, maybe this is thinking out loud, right? Like, oh, well, here's what I wonder. Things that we can take note of that, you know, we might be able to take some time to delve into and see what is in all of this information that we can use. And then if there's missing pieces or questions still left over, that then we would either have Sharon come back or get that information and point it out to you all. So I think there's time now for, you know, a few questions, and then I can add on to a few more things when we're finished with this also.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Sharon, I have a couple of things. One, I'm wondering, is it possible to incorporate race data into your demographics? I know you've relied heavily on the Experian, you know, demographics to describe our community, but you know, I think it's really for us. I think as a community, it's important to us to understand both what our intended consequences are for our policies, but also unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And without race data, I don't know if that will allow us the tools we need to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that, you know, when we're setting policy about rental licenses and those availability of that, does that have a disproportionate impact on people of different race groups? I don't know how we answer those kind of questions without race data.
Yes, it's something that the city council has brought up in prior discussions, and I know it is on our list as things that we could possibly address in the future. I will clarify though that I tend to avoid doing a market analysis on residential or on retail either. That's really kind of, that has race or ethnicity as a variable, because I tend to not want to imply in any way that we would recommend housing or build housing that would be race defined, you know, so we wouldn't like build housing for Hispanics or build housing just for whites or build housing just for blacks. So that's why I tend to avoid it, because it tends to be kind of it can be misinterpreted too easily by media, for example. So it's dangerous. And then also because I know that race and ethnicity are very tightly correlated, not tightly, but certainly correlated with income. And income is absolutely loaded into the analysis. So we absolutely know that where we have more ethnically diverse and racially diverse neighborhoods, that the incomes are lower. And it's not fair, but it is the reality of where we're at, that the incomes are lower, which means that they need more attainably priced housing. And the best way to diversify the city of East Lansing with race and ethnicity is to make it easier for lower income households to enter the market. That is within the scope of this analysis anyhow. That's how I always answer that, is that the best way to level the playing field and provide a point of entry for diversity is to lower the price point. And that means right sizing the unit, building more smaller units.
I have to add a comment because I know it's part of the city's master plan, universal or flexible design. And I don't know where that goes into this study. Maybe it goes into the strategic planning, but certainly that is something that I will advocate for, sticking as a major goal of whatever the final recommendations are.
Absolutely, and I think that goes hand in hand with finding those few developers, and there are some in Michigan, and Justin has a short list of who they are. He works with them, and we both do really. But you know, once you have a couple of developers that say, you know what, we do know how to do this, and we want to work with you because we know that you're going to ease the permitting process for us and work with us on some great sites and create some great projects that are not just student housing or something other than student housing entirely. Now you have a partner, and now you have a partner that will work with you on those creative design challenges, and you know, addressing other topics that might come up, as well as, you know, being barrier free or whatever that might be, having the right building amenities, the right unit amenities, and the right connectivity with surrounding community amenities. You know, those are all things that you can start talking about, everything from, you know, design and architecture to scale. And, you know, you have someone that you can negotiate and compromise with, instead of just being in a reactive mode where you're always just reacting to whatever the developers bring you.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Just, yeah, before we get too far away, I just want to make a couple of quick comments. And one of them really carries over into the policy end, but I just want to make mention for everybody else on the commission, if they're not aware, that in many cases, a lot of the proposals or the types of housing that have been proposed by a number of architects and planners and developers often cannot be built until, if and when the city, and I don't mean this by East Lansing, but it's cities across the country, change their zoning regulations, because in many cases these types of housing are simply illegal by virtue of the zoning laws. And so that's a policy issue that I'd like to find out at some point in the future whether any of these are feasible in East Lansing. The other thing to mention is that one of the underlying factors of the barriers in this community is the relatively high price of real estate, and that is a very important factor that may diminish the ability of developers to build the kind of housing that we need. And the third thing, I just want to mention this very briefly, but both Irene and I sit on the board of a nonprofit that in fact does build this kind of housing. Unfortunately, a lot of that housing is built with and through federal and state government programs. And when you take their money, you have to follow their rules. And again, they are not necessarily the most flexible or the most amenable to negotiation. So a lot of these things are wonderful to talk about, but we've really got to see what your partner comes up with regarding to policy, because that's where a lot of this will actually get resolved. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I have to say, I didn't have a chance to read the study earlier than this. I've been away, and this is terrific stuff, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your discussion today.
You're very welcome. Are there any other questions? So again, the purpose of this evening was to get you more grounded and comfortable reading the exhibits and interpreting the data. And the next step is to, if you haven't spent 2 hours actually digesting it, please do. And then take your notes and your, kind of big questions. We really want your big questions. You might find a typo here or something that just needs clarifying or that kind of thing. And that's helpful, but we kind of want your big questions, like what do you see as the implications of the data, and how are you connecting the dots, when you look at the correlations and what the implications might be for the city of East Lansing, and what sort of new questions does that bring to mind? And then please channel those questions back to Annette. And then she and Tom will have a dialogue, and then they'll tell me what to do. Thank you. We're at almost 2 hours. I don't know if you have other things on your agenda. Annette, would you like me to stay on, or should I step off?
Casey, do you have a preference, or did you have one more question?
If I have more, I'll email.
Okay.
So that we can, I haven't eaten dinner yet, so other people maybe are ready to move on with their evenings as well. But I just wanted to really make sure that nobody else had anything. I know it's awkward to wait like 10 seconds to make sure people have time to unmute, but I'm going to do that before we move on to the next agenda item. So anybody else have questions or feedback for Sharon?
I have a quick question. Why do you think so many people are shying away from different housing, for different types of housing other than single family?
I think sometimes we just get in a rut, and it's what we know, it's what we see, and it's kind of this rear view mirror approach is how I like to describe it. Is that we have a lot of, there's an inclination to kind of look at a market and say, well, this is what's here, therefore that must be what everybody wants. And it's easy to miss the fact that, hey, we can't just keep building more of the same, because we're going to miss out completely on all of these other target markets. So it's just kind of I think we just get in a rut, and that's really a big purpose of the work that I do. These market studies is hopefully as education for prospective developers as well. So one of the next steps possibly would be, to eventually make these reports available to the investment community. And I know that they read them. They will eat it like candy. And most of the developers in the local market, the Tri-County area, have seen my work in the past, because I have worked in the Tri-County area. So they're familiar with my work, and they'll know how to interpret it. And I usually find that it's eye-opening for them, and hopefully they'll see it as encouragement. I'll be honest, the Michigan Grand River Avenue corridor market analysis that I did back in 2013 was presented to a lot of the developers in the Tri-County area. And a lot of them did take that and start to invest along the Michigan Avenue, Grand River Avenue corridor. I have a chagrin that it seems that so much of what they're building is student housing. So I'm not, I struggle a little bit with the quality of the exterior materials, and I have other things that I wish they would do, that they could do better. But I do see that the investment that's happened along that corridor, did come partly out of their confidence in the work that I had done. So now we need to build their same confidence in the city of East Lansing.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question before we move on? And I'll wait a bit so you can unmute. All right, I'll call it. Thanks so much, Sharon. I really appreciate your taking the time to dive pretty deep with us into this data and share this information with us. I'll be sure to email Annette, and I would encourage my fellow commissioners, as you are all leafing through this. I think, Annette, is that the best way to do it? Is to email you comments and questions, and you can pass them on to Sharon?
Yes, I think that would be the best, is if you would all, as you digest it. And I will also, and I do think it's worthwhile to glance back at the last council meetings too, and kind of hear what council said and some of their questions, and also what they maybe are kind of going. There were some similarities tonight, to be sure. So I think you'll recognize that also. But it probably will be helpful. And so, as I said, there'll be more coming. Keep that in mind. Also, for you all, we have, and you can share this with, your friends and neighbors and colleagues and interested folks. I'm going to be sending an email to Capital Area Housing Partners. And on our website, we're starting to develop a site for the housing study information. So there is, City of East Lansing /housing study, and it'll take you to that section, and we have just started to populate it. So these materials are there, and there's also a comment form. You guys email us, but there's a comment form. So, to get people's general thoughts and feedback and ideas. We anticipate we're going to develop that site further. We're going to be posting some of our prior maybe policies and prior studies. And there was, recently 2017, and I feel like a whole year disappeared, so it feels more recent. But downtown housing policy study, and we will be populating the website with that information too, because this isn't the first time we've talked about housing. So a benefit, I think, is looking at what we've talked about in the past, where it took us. How do we feel about that? And then with this new information and data that we are all living in today, kind of taking it forward. So that, I just wanted to share that so that you all know about it, and you will periodically check. What I will make a commitment to do also for you guys is, when we add not maybe just one thing, but when we get a little bit more on there, a little more meat, or we make a change, I'll send out an email letting you all know so that you can take a look. And then also you'll be able to share that with anyone who's interested. Because I know as housing commissioners, sometimes you might have somebody go, hey, I know you're looking at this. Tell me more. And I think that's kind of the theme too, is tell me more, right? We want to hear from folks. Tell us a little more as we delve into this. So. Okay, that's it for that one.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Casey. And thank you, commissioners, for your time again tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, let me navigate back to our agenda. Without further ado, item number 5, any old business to be dealt with? I don't believe so, but I'll wait and make sure we don't have anything. Hearing no old business, we'll go to new business. I don't think we have anything under this one either, but I'll wait and see.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Janelle. I just wanted to bring up, since it was discussed last night at the Human Rights Commission, that they may be reaching out to the Housing Commission to start discussions focused around reparations. And the reason being the Housing Commission is because if any of you have had a chance to dive into that issue, the denial of home ownership has been a central component of denying generation after generation of people of color of being able to build wealth in their families.
Mm-hmm.
And so you may hear something from Chuck, I'm not sure, but I told my husband that I would give you a heads up on that tonight. And that's also a subject that I brought up to City Council last August. And I could put together a little reading list for anybody that's interested. It is fascinating. It's not the history that we're taught in school. And it's an issue close to my heart for a variety of reasons, but that's all I have for right now.
I look forward to hearing from Chuck or anybody else. That sounds like a good topic for us to delve into. Thanks
Wonderful.
for giving me the heads up.
Wonderful.
Any other new business? All right. We'll go on to staff announcements. I don't see Dana Watson with us today, I don't believe, unless she hopped on the participant. No, I'm getting the no sign from Annette. Annette, do you have an update for us that you haven't already given us?
Yeah, I'll update you on a couple of things, and I will be swift. But Dana did send along her hello to everybody. She said she might be listening in. She's not in as an attendee this evening, but she said, don't be surprised, I am listening. She had a couple other things, so she's doing that, famous multitask. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I had told Dana I would, is some of you may have heard, or if you get questions, I just thought we both felt that we would share this. It wasn't asked by the council to bring it to the Housing Commission, but at the last council meeting, the mayor did bring forward a ordinance. It is Ordinance 1500, and it's regarding leases and some regulation regarding lease renewal process between landlords and tenants. And it's related to, I was going to take a look here, double check a couple of things, but it is related to the time frame in which you can ask folks to sign a lease. So, or that someone could go and sign. So often the students go to property managers as early as September sometimes, and they've just arrived in August. And they are asking, hey, can I sign a lease for, 123 Easy Street now for next fall, for next August. And so this is an ordinance that would not allow for that. So they would have to wait. I think it was written with a minimum of 150 days is the proposed lease as it stands today. And it is, if you want to read it, I'll send you guys a link too. That would be easier. So tomorrow morning, when I'm on, I will email you a link to the language, and it's on the council's packet from last week. So because it's housing, leasing related, Dana and I, Dana had said, yes, please bring it up to you all. She said it's on council's agenda later in May. She thought to take action. I can double check that also. So if you read it, we clearly won't be meeting before then, but if you read it and you have input, I guess I would encourage you to go ahead and email council right through the website, on our website, your thoughts, pro, con, or otherwise on that. And I'll stop for a second in case there's a further question about that.
This is Janelle. I saw that in the council notes and saw that ordinance, and I read it, but I didn't understand what it was. So thanks for explaining that. I can see why that's a good ordinance, and I'd probably support that.
It was brought to the attention of council by Michigan State ASMSU, which is the student government. They had passed a resolution in favor of this. So it did come to the council's attention, I think through that avenue is my understanding. And the mayor also discussed how he understands that, we can only regulate this in East Lansing. So the hope would be neighboring jurisdictions would do something similar. Of course, that's not completely in our control, right?
Right.
So, and that's a little bit, I think, of what council is thinking about right now is what does that do to property owners in our own jurisdiction those in surrounding jurisdictions, Meridian Township, Lansing, which clearly all also have student rentals, although this is not just student rentals, any rental. So that's really the most, the direct thing that I wanted to share with you. I've already updated you on the website information for the housing study. I'll be in close contact with you regarding any new information in regards that we post regarding that. Changes that we make along the way. I guess I would ask for a little bit of patience and understanding that we're building this as we go. So if it's not all there today, and there'll be more as we go. Those are the big things that I have. If you're about town, if you're downtown, there's a lot of new sitting spaces downtown. I encourage you to take a stroll through. The weather is going to get warm someday, right? We're all still wearing our long sleeves and jackets, but if you go downtown, you'll see that there's a lot more sitting spaces downtown, gathering places that are spread out, right? For the whole reason that they're out there. So you can maybe go get takeout somewhere and have a seat. I personally took takeout lunch last week and I emailed Adam Cummins, who's had a lot to do with a lot of this, and said, hey, there was even a hand sanitizing station outside near one of these. And I was like, this is so great. So, there's changes downtown and there will be more as we go. We're going to have more construction downtown. I encourage you to keep an eye on our website for updates regarding traffic and construction. We're heading into that season. And as frustrating as I know sometimes it gets when you're the driver or the bicyclist, it's all good, right? Because we also don't want these broken up streets and whatnot. So a lot of it going on downtown. The Graduate Hotel will be opening up. I believe their target is mid-June. So that will be kind of nice, I think, for us to have the mid-June summer to see how that dynamic changes downtown and traffic, because we're not going to have a ton of big events where it'll all of a sudden be boom, where there's, a whole bunch of people in all of our downtowns, our hotels downtown. So that's kind of the immediate things afoot, more coming. Commissioners, I do anticipate that we will have a June meeting. I don't think we're necessarily going to have a ton of time to delve into more with the housing study, try to carve out some. I anticipate a couple of public hearings. We'll see in the next couple of weeks how that stacks up, but I just kind of wanted to prepare you all. I know sometimes if there's no business at hand, it's nice to have a little break 1 month or two in the summer, but we are not getting our break in June this year. So just a heads up on that. And I'll take questions if anyone has any.
Is there an art festival this year?
Oh, excellent question, Jennifer. I'm so glad you asked. There is an art festival this year. It is not in the traditional month of May, as you've probably mostly all concluded at this point, but it is scheduled for August. I don't have the date at hand. It's earlier weekend in August, and it is right now planned to be live and in person. But as we've all learned for the last over a year, you really got to go with the flow a little bit. So I know they have a deadline of early June to make that final decision if it can be an in-person aspect. What I will say is they're prepared to go virtual if they have to. And even if it's in person, my understanding is they're going to have a virtual component. So if you are someone who's grown to love this virtual format, or for whatever reason can't make it downtown to the festival, there'll be a way for you to engage. Other questions? Nothing. Keep an eye out. Mobile library is going to start hitting the streets. I understand. It's kind of a cool thing to see it about town. I'm sure there'll be dates for that also, but it's also a cool truck with that'll be hitting the parks and whatnot as we head into the warmer season too. And that is really all I have. If no one has anything for me, I thank you all for your patience this evening. This is kind of deep, hard stuff. So.
Thank you, Annette. Any last questions? Otherwise, I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ah, Larry, my favorite Larry. Larry moves. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, a second from Carrie. So we've got all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay.
Nay. Oh,
Larry.
I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention for a moment.
Thanks,
Sorry.
everybody. I thought this was a great meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, folks. Thanks for taking time to come together. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Annette.
Desiree, I'll sign off.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.